It is true that ancient civilizations always venerated the sun. The chief god in most pantheons is the sun god. However, Zeitgeist implies here that Jesus, the only begotten Son of God, is an outgrowth of God's Son, S-U-N. God's Son, S-O-N, and Son, S-U-N, are homophones. But this argument cannot be made in other languages, so the point is invalid. They bring up Horus. This is a far too simplistic representation of the myths surrounding Horus. In reality, there are many versions. There were originally several different gods known by the name Horus. It seems Zeitgeist is trying to make a parallel between Set or Seth and Satan. Besides both of these figures being evil and starting with the letter S in English, there is no parallel. The birth on December 25th can be immediately dismissed as irrelevant because nowhere in the Bible do we find any reference to the birth of Jesus being on December 25th. Nor do we find the birth of Horus on December 25th, but in the month of Koiak, or July 15th. Obviously, Jesus was not born in December, or any time in the winter for that matter, because we read in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, verses 7 and 8, that there were shepherds watching over their flocks at night. Jesus was most likely born in late spring or early autumn, as most scholars would agree. This date of December 25th was chosen about 300 years after the origins of Christianity in AD 354 by Roman Bishop Liberius of the Roman Catholic Church, based upon pagan thought and coinciding with the pagan sun god worship observance of the winter solstice and the Roman traditions of Saturnalia, rather than on biblical truth. This is why many Christians do not celebrate Christmas, because it is irrelevant to the Bible and rooted in pagan practice. Regarding Isis being known as Isis Mary, there is no scholarly information to substantiate this claim. There is also no evidence that Isis was a virgin in the myth. Translated from the Hymn of Osiris, the myth distinctly says Isis drew from him his essence. Various Egyptian scholars state very clearly that Isis was not a virgin when she gave birth to Horus, as Mary was when she gave birth to Jesus. For example, Richard Wilkinson, author of Complete Gods and Goddesses of Ancient Egypt, states, "Through her magic, Isis became pregnant by him, eventually giving birth to their child, Horus." As for the star in the east claim, there is no such myth in the story of Horus. There is no evidence in Egyptian astrotheology that they assigned the alignment of Sirius, the star in the east, to signify the birth of Horus. Neither is there any mention of any kings of any number. Even if Zeitgeist was right about this claim, it is irrelevant, because the Bible does not number the men that came to Jesus' birth, nor were they kings. They were magi, or wise men. Horus becoming a teacher at age 12 is nowhere to be found in the accounts of Horus. There is a form known as Horus the Child, but he wasn't a prodigal teacher. He was kept hidden away in the papyrus marshes by his mother until he was ready to be ruler of Egypt. In addition, no bibliographic material suggests Horus had a ministry, much less at the age of 30, nor was he baptized by Anup. The character Anup, which is also known as Anubis or Anpu, means royal child and is usually depicted as a jackal-headed or wild dog-headed man. Anubis was the lord of embalming, and through this is connected with incense and perfumery, but not baptism. Neither are there any statements to the effect that Horus had 12 disciples. Mention of Horus's followers are in the translation of the Liturgy of Funeral Offerings, the 4th ceremony. Actually, Horus had 4 followers called Hiru Shemsu. There is another reference to a group of 16 followers of Horus known as Mesnui, or blacksmiths. While 16 minus 4 is 12, this cannot be the intention of Zeitgeist. The total number of followers here is 20, not 12. In regard to performing miracles, there was some magic associated with Horus, but this is with Horus the child, not with Horus the elder or his adult forms. Horus on the crocodiles was a common manifestation of the importance of Horus in healing ritual. The power of this healing seems to come from his mother Isis, who is indeed the goddess of immense magical power. It is not unusual, though, to find reference to miracles in reading any ancient or modern-day literature. Nevertheless, we do not find one miracle that Jesus did in the Horus story. Horus did not walk on water, as the narrator claimed, but was thrown into the water. There is also no evidence for these names of Horus in the mythical accounts. He was known as other titles, however. Horus the child was known by magical titles such as Horus on the crocodiles. Horus, as son of Isis and Osiris, was known as pillar of his mother, savior of his father, and Horus as a sun god was also known as lord of the sky, god of the east, Horus of the horizon, and later associated with Ra. In the 4th dynasty, the king, the living god, may have been one of the greatest gods as well. But by the 5th dynasty, the supremacy of the cult of Ra, the sun god, was accepted even by the kings. The Horus king was now also son of Ra, not the son of God. None of the titles for Horus listed in Zeitgeist are recognized by any Egyptologist. Horus was not crucified, buried for 3 days, or resurrected for that matter. In some versions, Horus had one or both of his eyes injured, but he was not killed, and it was his father Osiris who was killed, dismembered, reconstituted, and revived by Isis, his magical mother. Furthermore, death by crucifixion was not invented until long after the origins of the myths of Horus. From the earliest times, the god was depicted as a bird or falcon whose eyes are the sun and the moon, and whose breath is the cooling north wind manifested in different birds and species. Does this look like Jesus? Again, there is no primary Egyptian records prior to the New Testament to support the resemblances of Jesus and Horus. Next is Attis. Concerning the virgin birth claim, the Olympian gods, or Zeus, cut off the male organ and cast it away. There grew up from it an almond tree, and when its fruit was ripe, Nana picked an almond and laid it in her bosom. The almond disappeared and she became pregnant. Nana abandoned the baby Attis. This is hardly a parallel to the biblical claim, but a desperate exaggeration. Again, December 25th is irrelevant. After Attis was tended by a he-goat, Attis fell in love and was not crucified, but castrated himself under a pine tree, which in no sense can be seen as death by crucifixion on a tree or a cross. Then Cybele restored Attis to life. Many critics refer to this as the resurrection of Attis, though there is no mention of a tomb or a 3-day period. Additionally, apologetics author Charlie Campbell states, the alleged resurrection of Attis isn't even mentioned until after 150 AD, long after the time of Jesus. Furthermore, Dr. Walter Burkert, a Greek religion scholar and author, stated, there is no evidence for a resurrected Attis. Even Osiris remains with the dead. As the Princeton theologian J. Gresham Machen points out, the myth contains no account of a resurrection. All that Cybele, the great mother goddess, is able to obtain is that the body of Attis should be preserved, that his hair should continue to grow, and that his little finger should move. Dr. Ronald Nash adds, it was only during the later Roman celebration, after AD 300, of the spring festival that anything remotely connected with a resurrection appears. Concerning Krishna, in Joseph Campbell's book Occidental Mythology, page 342, he stated, Krishna, whose terrible uncle Kansa was the tyrant king, the Savior's mother Devaki was of royal lineage, the tyrant's niece, and at the time when she was married, the wicked monarch heard a voice mysteriously, which let him know that her 8th child would be his slayer. He therefore confined both her and her husband in a closely guarded prison where he murdered their first 6 infants as they came. According to this story, the mother Devaki had 7 children before Krishna was born. This would not make Devaki a virgin. Distinguished professor of Hinduism in India, Vasudha Narayana, PhD, University of Bombay, said, I've never heard of Krishna being born of a virgin, either through Sanskrit or vernacular texts, or even folklore. And born on December 25th, wow. The text says explicitly he was born on the 8th day of the waning moon in the month that now comes between approximately August 15th and September 14th. I can't imagine why people would sit back and cook up all these conspiracies. The only mention of stars in Krishna's birth within Hindu literature is in the Bhagavata Purana, chapter 10, 3, 1-5.